So, walking in wonder once again. It's a beautiful spring evening in a delightful place in the city this time. City of Lights can also be a good area to let the mind wander freely. So, the theme that I would like to explore now is related to a kind of a change which I've noticed in my own perspective on life during the last couple of years. Once there was someone who said that there's no reason to be conservative until you have something to conserve. Now, the word conservative, of course, can mean many things. I'm not especially thinking about it, for example, in the political sense. Even though I guess the political sense will be somewhat related to it. But personally, I've always been very liberal-minded, you could say. My thought process has generally been very interested in new ideas, unexplored potential. My dream and the things that excited me has always been these new breakthrough inventions and paths which no one had anticipated. And of course that's still a very big interest for me. But in the last couple of years, I've somewhat changed my perspective on that. Maybe I like to think that I've grown a little more mature. And what's occurred to me is that, and this is of course also based on my own experiences with different problems that have happened to me when I've really followed this mentality of always looking for the new thing. I'm more and more convinced that the times when things work for me and when I see them working also for others and in general, there's often a kind of balance. It's like not too much, not too little, but just right. A sort of natural equilibrium. So what's been on my mind lately is the value of tradition, of the, let's call it, more conservative way of thinking. The way of thinking which respects the way things are and the things which have traditionally worked well and what has been around for a long time. And one of the reasons why I've personally been inspired in this direction is actually an interest in evolutionary theory. I mean, I'm no expert in evolutionary theory by any means, but I've picked up a little here and there and read some here and there and listened to some people who know more about it than me. And I find myself very interested in it. There's something about the way of thinking, which is typical of evolutionary theory, which is a kind of holistic, dynamic systems thinking, where each single entity will adapt to its environment. And there is this continuous interplay between the environment and the single active agent. And over long stretches of time, there are multiple versions which are tested out. And some versions survive. Now this means in the physical sense of some kind of organisms, but also some kinds of behaviors. And if we talk about human cultures, some kinds of ideas, human ideas, have somehow survived in culture for a long time. And this is where the evolutionary perspective for me relates very much to the conservative worldview in the following sense, and that is that if something has been around for a long time, if something has survived in human culture, and especially if it's kind of retained a certain characteristic style, even through many generations and many cycles of human cultures, then there must be something to it. There must be something in that phenomenon which is important, which is valuable, which has a fitness. So it's like, it can't just be total BS. If it has survived, and it has survived for a long time, it's probably not total BS. And there's another version of this too, and that is when I speak to people or listen to people, and I hear them make an argument, and they make this argument with real passion, and they have made this argument many times before. Maybe they have written a lot about it. They have spent countless hours thinking about this. And even though they have heard many other views, they keep at this point that they repeat. I'm sure we can find loads of examples of this. People who just have strong, passionate opinions over a long period of time. And the times when I've listened to them and tried to think, what do they mean? And to some extent see the world through their eyes. Very often, their point of view seems very meaningful and reasonable. And when I sort of get what basic assumptions they have, and what framework they see their idea within, I can see that usually, almost without exception, their point of view is totally logically coherent and sensible and understandable. And I find myself almost always agreeing with them, at least to a large extent. somehow that's related to this as well. That if they care so much about that, and they have a thought about it, even though they may be in some ways foolish or prejudiced and have their subjective, weird points of view, and certainly they will have their limitations like we all have, nevertheless, it's probably not total BS. There's probably something to it. And even if it sounds really idiotic, it's probably something to it even then. Maybe there's something missing in their perspective. Maybe there's something important which is missing. But somewhere in that key point that they're making, which they have thought about and which they do care about and show that they care about, there's probably something there which deserves respect. And that is another version of this, let's call it a somewhat conservative point of view. It is a point of view which, for me, has to do with a respect for reality. A respect for reality the way it is. And that includes the worldviews and opinions that have been formed and the way people actually are. Now often I've got ideas, I got hopes. I wish those people were like this, I wish them were like that. I wish they could see it this way, that way. Yeah. But that's my idea. And that's based on my experience. And I don't know everything about their experience. I don't know everything about why they feel the way they do. And as mentioned, the times when I have listened to them a little more than usual, I have so far always been surprised by how much more there was to their point of view than what I had thought beforehand. So another part of this is a respect for popular culture. Like, for me, I can say that as a person who's really interested in innovation and pioneer ideas, who really identifies as this person who's used to thinking outside of the box, at least my impression was there was many times I had a somewhat troubled relationship with popular culture, almost a sort of contempt for popular culture, very critical attitude to everything which is well known. It's the stupid masses, it's the sheep, it's all of the fools who are just been guided by the propaganda, and it's that sort of a mentality. And that mentality is problematic because it can so easily lead to this place where you become a little bit bitter, and you're always being misunderstood, and you're seeing each new misunderstanding as a sign that they are idiots after all, and they don't get it, and they should get it, and it becomes this inner conflict where you can't quite accept people and you can't quite accept reality, and then that makes it really difficult to listen to people and to connect with people. And I noticed that in myself, that when I've been in these, states of mind, you could say, especially the sort of agitated version, the protest version of it, that hasn't worked very well for my social relationships. And I've really missed out on some really important insights. In many ways, you could say that at those moments I've missed out on some of the most beautiful things that life has to offer. A possibility of connecting with another person and learning something interesting from them, from what they can see, which I cannot see. So it doesn't just have to be a one-way thing, it can be a two-way thing where we both learn something. And I have experienced that at moments, and that's something which is very characteristic of human beings. And which helps human beings to create new things together. So if I actually want to be creative, I somehow need to find a relationship between all of the big, original, groundbreaking ideas and perspectives and the wish to go far outside of everything normal and test out the wild thing that may some way work, and relate that process with simply the way things are, the practical, common, day-to-day existence, the way people are, the way their views are, the way you are, the way I am, the way the world is right now. Because if we're gonna get anywhere with any of those big fancy ideas, surely it has to happen beginning with the way things actually are now. It's almost obvious. And that's where I see the need to connect these two attitudes. The attitude of a respect for reality, which includes a respect for tradition and a respect for popular culture and for the opinions and the personalities and the behaviors of people as they are now. And to connect that mentality with this mentality which sees a world of possibilities unexplored, which asks questions about the way we have done things, and which has a keen attention on the dynamic character of the world and how much society has changed in a very short period of time, and why there is an objective need, it would seem at the moment, of some radically new thinking. And the conclusion that I've arrived at this point in my life process is that if anything of real value is going to come out of this, there has to be an approach which can, to some extent, it doesn't have to be perfect, but to some extent, as well as possible, combine these two attitudes in a balanced relationship where the big visions can make us see hidden opportunities in the current situation, while at the same time a deep respect for the way it is will help us to have some gratitude and relate with people who think differently without judging them. And where we take pragmatic small steps in the right direction. Beginning with the way it is now and make one small step in the direction of something which is a little bit better. And maybe that step is in the direction of something which has traditionally worked quite well in similar circumstances, and which maybe has become forgotten along the way. So my current impression about what would be the best direction for humanity to take is that it seems to me really reasonable if we could begin to look at the actual process we are involved in and to find a way of carrying this process out where we can make small improvements in just the way things are now and move us in the direction of a great, big, utopian long-term vision which absolutely rocks and which is our big long-term dream, which maybe never will come true, maybe someday will come true, maybe will come true sooner than we think, maybe will come true some other time, many generations after we are dead. And maybe what future will happen depends on what we will do now. That seems to be a really promising approach. If we can move in the direction of a fantastic utopia in the future, sometime in the future, which is undefined, and instead what we could define is a very big vision for how this would look. And then with this great big goal in mind, we could begin totally pragmatically, totally carefully and patiently with the way things already are. And we could begin by making the first few steps in the right direction, in the direction of a place from which other promising paths are possible. And my suggestion for a way to begin, as I mentioned, is to begin with the process itself and with the conversation itself. To begin with a shift in thinking, to redefine the problem that we are facing, and to see that in the current situation we may be able to do something which we had never thought was possible. If we can be smart, if we can collect the forces in a good way, if we can be really genuine and listen and be open for all kinds of possibilities and be able to learn from experience, we may be able to move the entire global situation in a very promising direction very fast. And then from that place we could move it further in a promising direction, and then further, and then further, while looking and observing and seeing what happens along the way and seeing what actually works along the way. Something else we could begin with in this process is to look, where are the actual areas of common interests between people? Now I have one specific example which I think is a brilliant example of an area where there is pure win-win potential. And that is in using resources more efficiently. Of course, the word resources, it's a very big word which refers to many, many things, and I really mean it in a very wide, general sense. It means, obviously, to not waste natural resources, simple things like recycling, and to make sure that the recycling processes are far more intelligent than they have ever been before, and that we can do with ease with the systems and the technology and intelligences we have now. And also, of course, time resources, human resources, human skills. There are people all over the world who have unique talents, unique skills and unique experiences, unique capabilities, competence, which can be valuable in many, many ways. And if we look at the current situation in the world, or the way it's been going for a long time, I think it's obvious that we could use resources far more efficiently than we've done until now. It seems like it's been a big leak in many, many ways. And the liberal-minded possibility person is quite right in saying that we have indeed only scratched the surface of what we could. And especially now, when the human minds all over the world can be connected through this amazing information system, which has grown vastly more advanced in a very, very short period of time, and which has already completely changed the way people live. And of course, resources obviously means the conversation itself and the process itself, which I already mentioned. This is an enormous resource. How do we use these communication technologies? How do we talk about these things? If we, for example, begin, for some reason or other at some point, to really seriously look for commonalities of interest and make that a priority because we simply see it's the most intelligent thing to do. And it's the safest thing to do with the least risk for anyone. That in itself will already change our mentality. And suddenly there may be room for forgiveness between people who used to be enemies. And there may be room for developing trust between people who were very suspicious of each other. So my general impression at the moment when thinking about life and the situation in the world is that we still have a very, very big opportunity as human beings. And in many ways, with all the mistakes we've done, we have come very far and we have created something quite unique. And even if we agree that it is at the moment maybe in a disbalanced way in relation to the rest of the ecosystem, this can be fixed. And maybe it can be fixed even quite easily. If we could really get together all the best minds and hearts all over the world and find a balanced approach where we can begin with what is already here and make small steps in the right direction and look at what works and change the approach where it's needed, while having a great big dream in the far distance.